told everyone I'd never succeed because I chose art over law school. At her birthday dinner, she mocked me again in front of the family. That's when the lawyer showed up with papers. Turns out, her husband passed and left behind a massive inheritance, but not to her. My Aunt Margaret never liked me. Ever since I was a kid, she would compare me to my cousins, reminding me how I was the artsy one, who'd never amount to anything. She wanted me to become a lawyer, like her, but instead, I chose art. For her, that was proof I was a failure. At every holiday dinner, she'd make little digs, calling my passion a hobby, while praising anyone who wore a suit. I learned to live with her judgment, even if it stung. My parents supported me, but they were quiet, never wanting to argue with her. And so I became the family's black sheep. Creative, yes, but never respected. The irony was that I wasn't asking for her approval. I just wanted her to stop humiliating me in front of everyone. When her husband, Uncle Charles, passed away, the family gathered for the funeral, and later for the will reading. Charles had been a quiet man, a lover of books, history, and, surprisingly, art. He and I always connected more than I ever did with Aunt Margaret. Still, I never expected what was about to unfold. At her birthday dinner a few months after Charles's passing, Aunt Margaret went back to her old habits. We were at a fancy Italian restaurant, the smell of garlic and wine heavy in the air. As the waiter poured champagne, she raised her glass and said loudly, "Here's to hard work and real careers. Not everyone can afford to waste their lives painting." The table erupted in polite laughter, but I felt every word like a knife. My cousins smirked, clearly enjoying the show. One of them even whispered, "Maybe you can paint us a portrait someday if you're not too busy teaching kids finger painting." They thought they were clever, and Aunt Margaret just smiled smugly, as if their mockery proved her point. I clenched my jaw, refusing to take the bait. It was humiliating, but familiar. I'd been the butt of her jokes for so long that it almost felt normal. Almost. What none of them knew was that Uncle Charles had left behind more than just memories, and soon, those smug smiles would vanish. A week later, the family gathered in a lawyer's office for the reading of Uncle Charles's will. The room smelled of polished wood and old paper, the kind of place that carried weight. Aunt Margaret sat at the head of the table, chin high, already assuming everything would fall neatly into her lap. She even leaned toward me at one point and whispered, "Try not to look too disappointed." The lawyer began, listing a few small items for various relatives. Then he cleared his throat and said, "To my beloved niece." Everyone looked confused until he read my name. Aunt Margaret's smile faltered. "I leave my entire art collection, along with the trust fund established for its preservation and growth." My heart stopped. The collection was famous, worth millions, and now it was mine. Gasps filled the room. My cousins shifted uncomfortably, whispering under their breath. Aunt Margaret's face turned red, her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair. She opened her mouth to object, but the lawyer continued calmly. "Mr. Charles stated explicitly that his niece was the only one who truly appreciated the value of his art." The room fell into stunned silence. My family, who had spent years mocking me, now stared at me as if I were a stranger. Aunt Margaret, always so composed, looked like she might choke on her pride. I sat quietly, not gloating, just letting the weight of the truth settle in. For once, the humiliation wasn't mine. After the reading ended, I stood to leave. As I passed Aunt Margaret, I leaned down and whispered, "Looks like the hobby paid off." She flinched, but said nothing. Her silence was more satisfying than any argument I could have won. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I ever had before. The lesson was clear. People will always underestimate what they don't understand. But sometimes life has a way of proving them wrong. And in this case, the proof came wrapped in oil paintings and a fortune she'd never touch.